Good afternoon, everyone. This is a panel on using data to improve laws of New York City. My name is Irene. There's Julia, Brooke, Rose, and Yulin. So first of all, I want to say that I'm happy to see you all today. I know it's been a long day. For many of you, it's 3 o'clock on Saturday. And I'm so happy we all here today to learn more about data and open data. My name is Irene, and I'm a mother. I'm a New York City resident, District 1, and I'm very passionate about data and data governance. About 6 months ago, I joined New York City Council as an attorney for the Committee on Technology. Before I came on board, New York City Council passed the law, Local Law 11, in 2012, that created open data. Since then, New York City has been recognized one of the leaders in the open data movement. So what is open data and why it is important? So open data means that it's available to the public. Anyone from all over the world can access and use data from the open data portal. And why it's important? First of all, open data opens many ways addressing problems and helps government to make data-driven decisions. Second of all, open data promotes transparency and innovation. And you will hear examples from my colleagues today. In New York City, we have a mayor's office of data analytics that is responsible for analyzing data. And if you was lucky to be on the to watch the panel today at 11 o'clock, you probably already learned a lot about the office. In New York City, New York City Council, we have our own data team that analyze the data and help us to make data-driven decisions. Data team was established about 3 years ago, and at that time had only 2 people, Rose and James. Rose is here with us. Over a couple of years, the team has grown, and now we have 7 full-time members. And I'm very happy to introduce you some of them. This is Julia, Brooke, Rose, as you know, and Julian. And they will tell you more about the work that they do at New York City Council.
Okay, thanks, guys. So we have, of course, the illustrious data team, as you see here, and also the web development team represented by Yulin today. Yeah, can we get, a little, yes, great. So first we're going to talk about kind of what the data team does and why it does those things. Our mission within the New York City Council, which is New York City's legislative body, is to promote a data-driven approach to the City Council's decision-making process. So just like a little, very brief, bill on Capitol Hill. So the City Council is the city's legislative body, so we make the laws. So kind of briefly, how that process works is that a council member has an idea, or somebody has an idea and tells the council member, and they say, okay, great idea, we should have a bill about that. I'm going to make a legislative request, and you'll hear more about that later, in legislative request, or LS, so just keep that in mind. They make a legislative request, and then there are City Council staff who write and draft the bills, like Irene, and they do an excellent job. And so they get this request, and then they draft a bill. And they're trying to write the best bill possible, right? Because this could be the law. And so when they're in that drafting phase, they talk with the data team. How are they going to make the best law, and how are they going to use data to do that? They draft the law, they write it, they introduce it in the chambers at City Hall. Then there's a public hearing, there's voting. The mayor gives a sign off. Okay, the bill becomes a law. And then web dev comes in at the legislative request, and then again at the bill becomes a law stage. So that's just like a little primer to get you up to speed on how the laws happen. So some things that the data team does involve oversight and working to create smarter laws. So the council is kind of like, the Senate, and then the mayor is kind of like the president, right? So it's like these checks and balances, and part of the duty of the council is to have an oversight role. So we use data to check about agencies make certain claims, or we monitor the kinds of services that the agencies provide. And we also use data, of course, to inform legislation. So our process in the data team is to work with the city council legislative staff. They'll come to us, they say, we have a question, we have a problem, we're wondering where does dumping happen in the city, or where do people get arrested in the city? We want to solve certain problems, and so the data team works with them to understand what is the question that they have, what's the problem that they're trying to solve. Then we look and find data. Is there data that could help solve this problem? And we use data from the Open Data Portal. We use data from agency reports that come to the City Council, which you will hear more about later. And we also use data from agency websites. We take that data, if it's relevant to the problem, and we analyze it. We used really simple methods. We use statistics also, mapping, machine learning. It kind of runs the gamut based on what the question is, what the data is, what makes sense to do in that certain scenario. Once we get kind of an answer, or, you can't always come to like a really concrete answer with data, right? It doesn't like solve all problems. But once we get to a conclusion, we'll talk with the committee staff again who are writing the laws and say, this is what we came up with, and we'll visualize those answers either with maps or charts or graphs, or maybe it's just a bullet points. And that analysis goes to either the committee staff who are writing the laws, or to the public to say, this is how we're going to solve this problem. So that's kind of the data team's process. So we're just going to go through a few examples of the things that we've worked on. Last year, the City Council saw that people of color were being arrested or given summonses for marijuana possession, and people of color were being given those violations at a higher rate than people who are white. And so the City Council looked into it. They had a hearing, which means that the agencies come and they testify under oath in front of the City Council. And the City Council was saying, okay, why is this happening? And they were talking to the NYPD in this hearing setting. And the NYPD said, well, we make arrests and give summonses based on community complaints. So community complaints kind of means like there are 311 calls or 911 calls about the incident, and the NYPD responds. So that's what their claim was. And we thought, well, we should look into that. Is that really the case? And so we were able to get 311 calls and 911 calls, and also see by precinct, where arrests were happening. And we didn't see a strong connection between 311 calls or 911 calls and people getting these arrests and summonses. So we were able to call into question these claims about this is the rationale of why people are getting these arrests or summonses, and then we can make a statement based on that, or write a policy to address the issue. So that's just one example of how a data team was able to kind of do oversight and understand how is a city agency operating, and can we collaborate their claims. Okay, we'll talk about turnstile jumping with Brooke.
Oh yeah, great. So one of the things that we do sometimes is to respond to or investigate claims made by agencies. So a couple months ago, the MTA put out a report saying that the cause for their decrease in revenue was this problem of turnstile jumping. And they put out this report that was really obfuscated. The methodology was like almost non-existent, but the methodology that was existent was really flawed. And so we were able to take a look and like point out those flaws and snap back and say, with a public statement, and say, if you're gonna make that claim, you have to have more evidence, or you can't make that claim. So that's like another way that we.
Okay, and hate crimes.
Okay. Also, so this was prompted by the increase in hate crimes across the country. The Commission on Public Safety and the NYPD wanted to explore what was happening in New York City on the ground. So, like, are these hate crimes increasing, and what groups are sort of the target of these hate crimes? So with the Council for the Committee on Public Safety and the data team, we used data from the NYPD to do a quick analysis. And that sort of entailed us validating the data that the NYPD provided, which sometimes entailed us calling up the NYPD and asking about discrepancies and asking for clarifications. But once we came to a reliable data set, we did find that over time, hate crimes, arrests for hate crimes were increasing, and that certain groups were arrested, or arrests were made for hate crimes against certain groups in greater numbers than others. And so we were sort of like, oh, this is what's happening. But the major takeaway from this analysis was more that the NYPD seems to be doing a pretty good job at making arrests, but that arrests are not a deterrent. And so there needs to be a more proactive approach to this problem. And so what came from that is Councilmember Levine introduced a bill to establish the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes. And that's a place where introspection can happen, real analysis can happen, and educational outreach and interventions so that, you know, we can stop these hate crimes from hurting people's lives.
Okay, evictions.
So evictions, about a year ago, we became interested in seeing where evictions were occurring throughout New York City, especially since the council passed legislation that creates the right to counsel and the certificate of no harassment pilot programs. And a colleague of mine was doing the digging to see where this data was at, and he noticed that it's no longer on the open data portal. Previously, he saw that it was, and for some reason, it wasn't there anymore. So he did some more digging and found it on the Department of Investigation's website on the page for marshals. So there was like a little web application where you can search either the zip code, docket number, and some other search features for evictions. And we were like, if this information is on an agency's website, it has to be on the open data portal as well. So we did some phone calls, and we were successful last summer. Marshal eviction data from 2017 is on the open data portal now. So we did some analysis, and for our speaker was the acting public advocate, and he did a sort of little overview on the situation of evictions in New York City, and we did a little website on that. We found that the Bronx and Central Brooklyn are areas with the highest eviction rates in the city. We also found that properties that have had at least one eviction have at least one rent-stabilized unit. Close to half of them have a rent-stabilized unit. 60% are a multifamily dwelling structure. This includes both elevators and walk-ups. And about half were built between 1910 and 1930. So I created, Julie has the maps here. So the first Cardo dashboard map, you went to building details. Evictions. So when speaking to advocates, they really wanted to see eviction rates aggregated at certain political boundaries. So they requested to see this for the city council district boundaries, community district, state assembly, and state senate. They were very interested in seeing state assembly and state senate because they were going to go push at the state legislature for more support on this. So this map just shows you each point and aggregates it at the district boundaries. So the second map provides sort of a more context to see what's happening more in the experience of a tenant. So we're not only looking at evictions, but seeing which properties have subsidies, which properties have a rent stabilized unit, which properties have how many series HPD violations they're getting. Same thing for oath and ECB violations, how many heat and hot water requests they're getting, just sort of to see what stresses tenants are facing and what protections there are in terms of subsidies, or maybe since they're protected from subsidies and rent stabilization, they're also being, harassed in other ways. So this, in the council staff, they really like this map compared to the other one.
Okay, so those are some examples of kind of like projects that we've done to look at specific issues or to improve how we're making laws. So that one kind of law that the city council makes is a reporting bill. And a reporting bill asks a city agency to deliver either to the public or to the city council specific information about their operations. So you might say, Department of Sanitation, we need you to report how many tons of garbage that you pick up every year. Things where we're asking for like pretty specific data and information about how they operate. So the data team works to kind of make sure that when we are creating those laws, that they're answering the questions that we want to answer and that we're going to get back information that we can use. And that's the most helpful information for everybody's time. Once again, we work with the city council legislative staff to understand, okay, what's the specific issue or problem that you're trying to address or question that you're trying to answer. And then we look at the bill, so they like kind of give a draft of the bill. Okay, we're trying to find out how much garbage that we're picking up every year. And then we'll come in and say, well, it would be best if we could see like more specific information, right? Like we don't want to see the aggregate information. We want to see like for each time that there's garbage that it's picked up. So we want to see a row for each incident. So we might propose that. We might say we need to see things at a really specific geographic level, like don't give us the count for the council district. We want to know by latitude and longitude where each piece of garbage is being picked up. So we're always trying to get the most information possible, but then we also need to consider privacy concerns, right? Like maybe we need to be careful not to write a law that's like we need to publish every domestic violence abuse victim on the internet or something like that. So we need to be conscious of marginalized groups when we're asking for information and how that might affect them, and bring that into kind of this legislative process. Another kind of maybe legislative particular aspect of this is that it needs to be future-proof. So the laws last for a long time, right? It's really hard to pass a law, which is good. But we need to write the laws in a way where it's still going to be relevant in 100 years. So we can't say we need to use GitHub to publish something. Because who knows what the state of technology will be in society in 2 years, 5 years, 50 years, 100 years, what have you. So we need to be particular in our language to communicate that things need to be machine readable, but we cannot specify like a certain technology, for example. So those are kind of the things that we balance in terms of writing reporting bills for the agencies to deliver information. And one reporting bill that we worked on recently.
Right, and
Rose knows about this.
Yeah, the pay equity reporting bill. So it does exactly what Julia said about balancing requiring more individual level data and protecting the privacy of people. So this bill is first of its kind at the council. It was passed in January, so not too long ago, and it requests two things that tries to do this balancing act. So it's all in order to see if there's any pay inequity in the city employment workforce. So we request DCAS, the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, to provide individual level data to MODA, which is the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, and to the City Council individual level data on employment characteristics. So this includes their race, ethnicity, gender, years of experience, education, and other factors, and provides to the public race, gender, and ethnicity. These were categories that advocates really wanted to see inequities, and they were very strongly saying that these categories would show inequities. And the data team's like, hold on, we need to see the whole picture. It would make erroneous conclusions without accounting for other variables, and that's why the need to see more information in order to make the claim that race, gender, or ethnicity has an effect on pay inequities in the city. So we request this data via API. We're going to have this data for a short period of time, and then we will no longer have access to the data until the next year. So it's every year we'll be running this report and seeing the data. Council member.
Yes.
Kumbo was the sponsor of the bill.
So this is not a reporting bill specifically, but Adrienne Adams here sponsored this bill, which you may have heard about before, which codifies the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. So that means that we wrote a law that said the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics needs to exist, and that the mayor should fund it, essentially. So that means that when there's a new mayor, they can't get rid of the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, which is great. As we can all agree that we should be looking at data, because they do a great service of looking at data and being strategic and prioritizing risk and this sort of thing. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about MODA? No. That's just great, and that's a good job. Okay, so let's, Yulin will take over and talk about the web development team at the City Council.
It's my turn, kind of getting hot right now. So my name is Ling Shan. I'm the full stack developer from New York City Council on behalf of my team being here. Our team is established based on the aim of transforming our day-to-day manual business into an automated system, which is a website, to make our legislative division smarter and work more efficiently. So the process for our project is basically starting from collecting and defining our requirements. So our manager has a very large blueprint of what he wants to realize in the website, which contains a suite of applications. So once we start building an app, we will communicate the detailed information with the end user about the detailed information about that service and break down that service into different deliverables and tasks. The next step is to come up with a rough idea of how the website should look like. And after that, we start coding from the most common operations, which is the cron operation, stands for create, retrieve, update, and delete. And we also add other features like tag display, tour guide, pagination, and email notification, which I will talk about later. And after that, we give the credentials to a few of our end users for testing our application and give some feedbacks. So after that, we reiterate to the very top to redefine our requirements and improve our website before we finally release our website on the cloud server. Next. So this is one of the applications we have so far called Legislative Request System. So basically 51 council members are in charge of creating the ELSE request, which is legislative requests. And it's our responsibility for helping them verifying those requests and tracking what stage the current ELSE request is at. So the reason why we have this is because we want to reduce the labor work and make the work more efficiently, and also because our current existing system can't afford large data flow, and we need a smarter system for easier scaling. So as I mentioned, we provide a very basic function, like you can create, update, and read the existing else request. But we also provide other functions, like you can toggling the column to see the information that you want to display instead of looking into the wide, ugly table. And we also provide the filter function so that you can search based on specific column or keyword. And we also provide duplicate checking, which credits to our data team come up with the idea. For example, if two council members come up with similar else requests and put it into the else request table, so we're gonna do the duplicate check to just handle one of them or combine the idea together. And that's for else requests.
I just thought I would remind us about the legislative
Oh, the
process.
process. That's good.
Okay.
All right, the report calendar is another application that we have, which is really, really good one. So basically, previously we have just an Excel spreadsheet for tracking and updating information about the community reports. So it's very hard for them to figure out the accurate information. So we visualize the raw data as a calendar format, as you can see there. So it's very easy for you to see what reports are going to come in due. And as I mentioned, we provide a very general function, like you can create, update, and read existing data report information. But we also provide the switch function where you can either display it as a calendar format or as a table format, which is exactly you have in the Excel spreadsheet. And we also...
Oh, I just wanted to bring in, so the reporting bills that we talked about, those reports come to the city council and or to the public, and the calendar system is to keep track of when are these reports supposed to come to the city council or the public. Sorry.
Thank you for explaining.
Do your magic. Okay.
And we also provide a filter function as we have in the else request. And you can download the reports if previously someone uploaded through our system. And we also have the quick search. If you click the month and year, you can directly go to a specific month and years to see the reports are due on that month and year. And we have the tag display here, which is a really nice way to display a multi-selection stuff underneath your title. Next. Okay. Julia's a little busy. Okay, the final application that we have, which is an amazing one that we have, is a legal wiki page. Basically, it's for bill drafters who wants to get all those information in a center and characterize all those information in a proper way of different levels. And again, we have the very common operations like create, update, and view content of different levels. But we also enable the end user to leave comments to give some inspiration or recommendations to their colleagues. And that's what we have so far. And that's not our final goal, because what we want to do is to make our website more user-friendly, more convenient to use. So we add some little magic to our website. And this is one of the things that I'm most proud of, which is a tool guide for the report tracking system, which is the calendar system. So basically, because our end user are non-tech people, so it's really hard for us to provide training courses for all of them. And even though that we provide training courses, they may come up with A and B questions later on. So this is just an easy way for them to quickly go through what features that we provided so far. And if they later on have any confusion, they just quickly click the information icon and go through it again. So these are the applications that we have built so far, and we're really proud of it. And we're going to add more features and application to the system to make people's life easier. And that's for the web.
Thank you, Lynn. So, let's see how we're doing. We're doing great on time. Okay, and then we'll have questions at the very end. I guess we just wanted to finish it off talking about how we as a data team have found success, how within, maybe if you're part of a large institution, like how can you incorporate data into your operations. So something I think that we have benefited from is that The leadership at the City Council has been very supportive of using data to improve the legislative process. So that means that the Speaker of the City Council, Corey Johnson, who's like the head of the City Council, has a really strong record of support for these kind of initiatives. So that's kind of one thing I think that helps us to do the work that we need to do. Within the institution, I think that data is not everybody's first language, right? So I think something that we've done and been successful at doing is we work with the legislative staff to write these bills and come up with answers, but then also producing a compelling and easy to understand visual argument like map, chart, anything that's that makes the work really easy to understand. And it's like a really clear takeaway from the work that we are doing. And that shows this is the value of using data to improve our operations. I think I don't know if anybody wants to jump in on.
Yeah, we can talk about challenges together.
As a group.
I feel like we're experts.
Yeah. No.
I guess one of the bigger challenges is with these legacy institutions where data is a revelation, I guess. How do we integrate it in a seamless way, in a way that helps people do their job better, and in a way that preserves the integrity of the statistics and the data. So it's like a work in progress, I suppose. It's a really iterative process. With each project, I feel like we get better and better at communicating what we can do, communicating the findings, the limitations of data. It's not magic, it's just information. And so it can only go so far in saying something. Mm-hmm. And so that's been an interesting problem to solve, I think.
Kind of this garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. If we don't have the data, it's hard to make decisions. Right. Or just even I think another part of it is how do we say data should be part of the beginning of the process and not the end of the process? And so we have worked really hard too to say we need to be there at the beginning of when a bill is being drafted so that we can do this in a smart way. And I think that has been pretty successful, but that's something that we are that we work on all the time.
So many times we get an email saying, "Can you do this by tomorrow?" I'm like,
it's
yes, but
this idea that we're just pushing buttons and spewing out beautiful graphics. It's still there's.
It's true.
It is sort of true, but there's a lot of buttons to push.
Yeah.
So there's that just understanding each other's work because it's so different. It's been a journey.
Yeah. But I think we've been successful in people adopting kind of a new way to think about laws, a new way to make sure that we're producing the best laws that we can so they'll exist for a long time. So I think in that sense, we've been really successful.
We've also have integrated ourselves to the committee staff meetings. So usually, hopefully, that helps us being at the beginning when ideas for legislation is being thought up in a group of people, lawyers, and that way we can this could have this data input here, and then we can assist you here now. Mm-hmm. So that has been a great help. It still needs work because they sometimes forget to invite us, but
and each I guess just for context, each bill when it's being drafted goes to its issue specific committee. So something about garbage would go to the sanitation committee, and those people work on it, and the process goes through that committee in terms of voting and drafting the law and stuff. But I think that's kind of those are some examples of the work that we've done. This is how you can get in contact with us. There's a myriad of ways. This presentation is on our GitHub, so you can find it there later. And we're going to do questions now. This person is Yes, you were your hand is first, you are ready.
Oh, I just want to follow up that applause. This is the coolest presentation I've ever seen. I hope I speak for everyone in this room. I feel revived. This was incredible. I feel like I just discovered my calling in life. This is phenomenal. Thank you so much. I'm embarrassed I don't know the answer to my questions, but now I'm just going to have to ask it. I'm just going to be embarrassed. Many legislative bodies have a requirement that that when before a bill can become a law, that has to be analyzed for budget impact. And different legislative bodies, whether it's like a city council or state government or whatever, like handle this kind of differently, because this may involve like math, kind of like far outside what's sort of possible. And so like the kind of economic impact assessment you might see from like an outside interest group will be super different from what like a Department of Legislative Services type, staff is. They're just gonna be like, okay, this doesn't like directly impact like a line item that I could find in the state budget or whatever. So first off, I don't actually know if New York has that requirement. So my first question would be that. And then second would be just, you guys shared a ton of interesting examples, case studies of your work. But I'm curious about whether there is like economic impact analysis, like in the work that you do, like whether it's like looking at the legislation itself or looking at agency claims, or I actually can think of a lot of different ways it might come up. And then also, in addition to looking at agency claims, if you evaluate, the kind of work that you're doing is actually in many other situations done by like outside interest groups that are like pushing for a bill that they're like, well, because anyone can like go on an open data website, right? But like, do you find yourself having to like kind of check like all kinds of other people's work, or I'm just kind of interested in how these things get scoped sometimes, and then this question specifically about economic impact.
So to address the finance part of it, we have a finance division at the council, and they also attend the committee staff meetings. So recently, the addition to those committee staff meetings was the data team and the press team also. So that's really putting all four players, so the lawyers, the media, the finance people, and the data team in the same room, which is very important and has, I think, been successful. So the finance do produce economic impact statements, especially for bills that have a lot of monetary components, like the right to counsel that provides. So that thing is being phased in. So it's at the zip.
What's the right to counsel?
So the right to counsel is providing free legal aid to tenants who have an eviction notice when they're at court. And this is being implemented at phases, so not all, it's at the zip code level, so I think 3 zip codes in each borough have this right to counsel available to them, and then it's eventually all of New York City will be covered. So the finance division did work in creating the numbers of how to budget those free legal services to tenants. So they play a role in that. I think your other question was...
do we check outside groups' work?
I feel like it's really important for things to be reproducible. So if some outside advocate comes at us with some analysis, we want to make sure that that analysis is reproducible and to have something in-house to be able to do that so that we can all agree on something is really important.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like we spend a ton of time doing that, but I guess on as needed kind of thing. Yeah.
Also, Ted, like whenever we're doing something or passing legislation, we look to see what the advocates are doing, because they're usually the first people on the ground knowing what's happening. So getting their input into anything that we pass is something that we do too. And what we did for the acting public advocate highlights that we did, we reached out to all the advocates, getting their input before displaying anything on the website. Yes. Yeah.
Do you ever get sort of repeat requests or similar enough requests? And at what point would you decide to make something a live tool if you're getting a lot of similar requests, or how do you balance that?
Like when do we make applications or like dashboards?
This is Yulin's purview, but I think that so I think that we often make tools when there's like a repetitive process that could be made more efficient. That's something that like many staff members do.
I have an example. For example, the mayor's management report is given out every year. It sort of gives like metrics on different services that each agency has, and it tells you for like fiscal year, their target was this, did they meet it, and the next year's target, did it go up or down? So that's something that the staff reviews every year, and that is something that we create an application that takes in the data, and then it divides it by the different agencies. Not all staff member needs to review all the agencies, just the agencies they're assigned to. So it divides it to the agency that they're seeing, and then we give out that information to each one.
So case by case, kind of.
Most of the time, it's like a lot of things are particular, that things have to be started new.
We also can't make an app for every single person.
We don't.
In your research process, particularly when you're doing hypothesis testing, how do you review your experimental design? And then with these bigger data sets, how do you avoid data mining and p-value hacking?
So we deal with a lot of observational sort of type stuff. We don't have the opportunity to set up too many experimental designs, but we have a I am a statistician by training, and a couple of our colleagues have strong backgrounds in math and stats, and so we sort of, and our chief data scientist has a PhD in physics, so we sort of get together and come to an agreement on an analysis and if our assumptions are bogus or not, and we're pretty ethical when it comes to not p-hacking, and it's a case by case because the questions vary all over the map.
Looking at the residuals to confirm the p-value.
Is there so in terms of reproducibility, do you guys sort of report that research or
So we put stuff up on GitHub.
Okay.
Everything's up on GitHub, and we use R Markdown, and we typically link to APIs to get the data, and have our analysis is in a document for everyone to see. And we welcome criticisms and feedback.
We're strong promoters of pushing as much as we can to the public. We sort of get pushback on that as well because there's some bills legislation require confidentiality. So that's also something that we're struggling with, to put more data and our analysis out there.
And I think too, as we probably all know, we use a lot of stuff that's on the Open Data Portal. And that can be messy because it's about our interactions or the agency's operations. So I think another thing that we do is kind of try to always push the agencies. How can we get better data quality, which is super important. Yeah.
Do you ever use data from agencies outside of New York City?
I guess we did this with the MTA. Is that right? I think so.
No, that was MTA data from within.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mean data from outside the city. I mean outside the city agencies.
Yeah, so that we use the MTA API to get ridership information and trends, ridership information.
Mm-hmm.
Census data.
Yeah, we use ACS a lot, FactFinder.
Mm-hmm. I think it's we can make laws about certain city things, right? So I think where it's relevant, with ACS, then we can look outside of it. I think it's where it's relevant. But a lot of things is we can legislate about telling agencies what to do, basically. So outside of that, it's not always relevant. Yeah. Okay, sorry, this side is so neglected.
I guess somewhat similar, or to jump off of the point you just raised about telling city agencies what to do. For particular city agencies that are very invested in their operational privacy, how do you, and in particular with revealing more of their internal metrics, say for public safety, how do you all navigate getting the information you need with the pushback that you may receive on transparency measures?
I think it runs the gamut. We work with the committee staff who have the domain knowledge about each particular subject.
And establish relationships with those agencies.
Yeah, so sometimes it's just, we want to ask. We're going to ask, and maybe we'll get it. And sometimes it's okay, we got to do a law. We got to make a law to make sure this happens. So it kind of depends, I guess, maybe how forthcoming and what we need to know to make decisions. And it can run the gamut of just okay, just send that to us, or you need to post this on the open data portal and people are obliging, or we got to institutionalize this in terms of creating a law.
Agencies do say no, and the council has the power to subpoena. Hasn't used it yet.
But it's also like in things like, you know, we do have the open data law that agencies need to be compliant with. So if it's on the agency website, it has to be on the open data portal. If it's foilable, then, you know, it could also be on the data portal. This kind of thing. So it's in some ways we have structures in place to deal with this. Yes.
So it seems like in terms of the way the process works is that there's some idea already there, and then you will do the analysis to, you know, figure out what should be put into the bill. Does it ever sort of work maybe the other way around, where there's some analysis that you all do that might then inform a bill being created, or does it usually work that way?
I think like some of the things that we do kind of have our own independent projects that are, or we're doing our own research and that aren't reactive, I guess. And so there are situations where it's like, oh, I was curious about this. Maybe we should make a bill related to that. Like this is what I found. So yeah, I can totally go both ways, where it's like we are doing our own research and making our own recommendations.
I think kind of related to your question, do you ever use data sources from outside of city agencies within New York? But, you know, for example, the hate crime data that you had is from NYC, but may not represent all the hate crimes, because those are just the ones that were reported. So do you ever use outside sources to corroborate or to enhance the data of your agencies?
And so those were only arrests too, and so that was like the purview of this sort of analysis. But yeah, I mean, we recently did a map on where to get different healthy feed, like CSAs and food boxes and food pantries and all the places in New York City that you can access food. And we use an advocate's data that's been around, Just Food, that's been around for like over 20 years or something. So yeah, we do. We're open to that, but there's just so much data on the open data portal, and you know, spend years on it.
So I guess some of this has already been asked, but do you ever find there's like a chicken or the egg situation where you so you need to ask for a report to be made by an agency in order to study the data within that report, but then your analysis reflects on those reports, and obviously this could take years to get a report on a certain thing, and then the data is old as soon as it comes out. So how do you deal with that frustration or that situation? Because you're not going to have a report on every subject every year. Tell an agency, or like, because city council members usually ask for these agency reports, right? So can you ask the council member to do that?
Well, depending on the relationship with the agency, you can just ask the agency, have you guys been following this? Can you tell us if there's any updates? Like some agencies are more than forthcoming in telling us how they're doing. The thing is that we have to take what they say at face value sometimes. And other agencies are like, absolutely not, we're not going to tell you anything. NYC does that a lot.
So yeah, I think if there's like something that the council member really needs to know to make a new piece of legislation. I think there are, we can communicate with the city agencies to see if we can get that, or I guess there are other ways to try to get that information, or we could have a hearing and say, and ask them questions directly. So I don't know if we really haven't gone with that as an issue.
Yeah. So this is related to, I think, some of the questions about using data to inform new policies, but in the federal government just recently there is a law passed by Congress called the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act, which also includes the data law, which essentially creates a framework to support or almost mandate some level of evidence building and data to support policymaking. If any of you are familiar with that, I'd be curious to hear your perspective. But in general, it's just like do you see that there is maybe the need or an opportunity for like a legal framework to better support the use of data and evidence in policymaking and new policy in general?
Yeah, I guess that could be, I mean, right, there's this example. I'm not super familiar with the federal example. I know it's a thing, but I think it's very possible to say, to legislate, we need to put in these steps before passing legislation. We need to have rigorous development of these ideas in order to go forward. Is that?
Yeah,
I know
I mean,
that's a
probably
good question.
One of the difficulties around evidence-based data-driven policy is what data exists and the quality of the data. So requiring it is a little complicated.
Right.
That audit.
Or also just the concept of pilot policy projects, like trying to find small experiments. I don't know if that's done currently. What are those examples of that?
Like, what do you mean?
Like to have a very isolated example of experimenting with a new policy, like limited to a specific, I don't know, neighborhood or time frame or whatever, then but do evaluation of that limited pilot of a policy.
Right, yes. Yeah, I mean, that kind of thing happens a lot.
Yeah, like, for example, the certificate of no harassment pilot, it's a pilot, so I guess it's just a couple of regulated buildings are required to, building owners, if they want to do any significant change to the property, needs to file a certificate of no harassment to make sure that they're not doing any updates or will be harassing their tenants out. And it's a pilot, so there's like maybe just 50 buildings in it, and I think from that pilot there might be a report that sees how, that would evaluate how well it came out, and then I guess the expansion or a change in how it's executed.
I think the TLC had an example of a pilot for limiting the number of ride-mail for hijacking companies for like years.
Like pilots are used a lot when it's like new and we don't know the different factors that might play.
And oftentimes there's like a report required, like what are the results, what are the findings of the pilot program. So in some ways that's like in place to pilot pilots. Yes, sorry, very quick. We got 5 minutes. So.
You mentioned earlier about the right to counsel rollout. And I know that the court system in New York City is actually run by the state, and MTA we know is run by the state. So like when y'all are doing your work and you are running into having to look at like data from the state, which I think is getting back to what you were talking about, so rather than like city agencies that maybe display some resistance to transparency, what are the powers that be over state data that the city needs in order to respond to? We technically don't have jurisdiction over the state, so yeah, what is the process for navigating that?
I don't know that they are responsible, the state is responsible to do that at all, but I also want to say that we're not lawyers.
I think that for your data, so thinking about
yes.
how you're studying or you have incorporated like the right to counsel information,
right?
For the city to put forward that bill. I guess what are some of the topics that you have?
What the city does is instead of passing a law that mandates, they pass a resolution, meaning it's like a petition to the state. So it has no power, but it's letting the state know that we want this to be done. And we know that the state has the power, we don't. Can they do something about it? And maybe then a state legislator sees it and then moves it along in their state change.
Yeah, that's
right. 5 minutes.
What about you?
I'm just going to answer that one because I'm part of the rollout of that program as the attorney side. The reason they where they get the data is from the people doing the work like myself, because that's our reporting. So when they come out with it, the city has the Office of Civil Justice, which is a new agency, which we report to, which is part of HRA. And so they get the data from there. The evictions they get, because that's city, HPD city, and the court stuff, they get it through the attorney, because everything we're doing, we want to get paid for. And so in order to get paid, I have to do a lot of time in databases instead of being in court.
Okay, yes.
I just wanted to ask, did you ever, have any of you ever stopped or suppressed the bill from work with data, and would you be open to having more powers of veto in the future?
Sometimes it doesn't make sense to do a bill. Like, it doesn't make sense to do a law. Like there was a situation where somebody wanted to make a law making like dumping, like fines for dumping higher. But we looked at the data, and the issue wasn't that the fines need to be higher. It was really that there was no enforcement being done in the current state. So really the solution to the problem is increased enforcement, and it wouldn't really be solved by a law. So I made that recommendation, like, we shouldn't really write a law about this. And it's like a conversation. It's not like data team says no. Though we do have that stamp with the so that sometimes it happens, like it doesn't make sense to write a law all the time.
And I have to say that our deputy chief of staff of legislation, she does an amazing job at sort of like saying no to sometimes to council members and their ideas. Sometimes they are like like so out there, and I think she does sort of like this juggling of like, because sometimes council members want their idea out there and will continue pushing for it, and she's maneuvering, politics around these things.
Irene has a comment.
And I just have a one last comment because we're running out of time. So I want to say thank you all, and thank you for our data team. They actually do amazing job advising us lawyers with the data and making the policy better and New York City a better place. So I want to thank you all.